So you've loved Winter's Tale for many years,
I have.
and writing and ultimately directing the movie became a very personal journey for you. Can you talk about that?
I loved Winter's Tale when I read it. I was in my 20s in New York, here, on a subway. I remember the moment where, in the novel, Peter Lake remembers the color of Beverly's eyes. And it's so sad and so beautiful. And it stayed with me forever. And some years later, I convinced Warner Brothers to option it for me to write and produce. And I was trying to do that. With, there were sort of fits and starts and stops and starts. And when I finally was sort of closing in on it, my wife passed away very unexpectedly, and it became a way of sort of writing about loss and how love sort of exists beyond mortality and all those sort of big themes that are in the book. And as I did that, I felt so attached to it that it was impossible for me to give it up.
Now, how did you tackle cutting down such a huge story? I mean, the book is at least 800 pages or so. How were you able to cut that down into your film?
The book itself is dedicated to a larger array of characters than Peter and Beverly, although they are, I think, the center of the spine. They are the spine of it, both, I think, functionally and certainly from my view. But there are other characters, especially there's one character named Hardesty Marietta who has hundreds and hundreds of pages and a journey all his own. So the very first thing I did was omitted that. So that created a much shorter object to adapt. And then, it is, as is the case with any adaptation, an attempt to distill out that which is important to you as the adapter and hope that that will be important to other people who loved it.
You've directed before, but this is your first directorial debut on the big screen. How was that for you?
It was more challenging than I had imagined. I keep calling all my friends who are directors and telling them I love them and that I'm sorry, that I never understood quite how hard it was. And definitely directing a feature is different than directing television. Just because television is sort of always just a lot of the middles of things. Television doesn't have first acts and third acts, really. You're always just directing the second act. It's always just sort of in the midst of life and the lives of the characters on the show, which is very different than beginnings and ends, which movies require. So it's fascinating.
That's great. Can you talk about working with this great cast of actors that you were able to secure?
I've worked with a bunch of them before, and this was kind of, a labor of love. It's 20 years worth of favors, actually. I asked a lot of folks who I know. I wrote Pearly with Russell in mind. I've known Jenny since Beautiful Mind. Colin is somebody I've wanted to work with for years, and we've talked about things. William Hurt is still, hopefully forgiving me for Lost in Space. I mean, there's a lot of history here.
So the movie deals with a lot of big themes. There's good versus evil. There's loss and hope. There's everlasting love. Can you expand on some of those themes that you included?
Well, I think the movie is kind of a fairy tale for grown-ups in that it starts out as kind of a normal fairy tale, and then it is subverted by life, and it becomes something else. And that is part of what I'm trying to do with it, which is to suggest that life is kind of a storybook, but it's not the storybook that we imagine when we're young. That it requires redefinition, but that finally there is a reasonableness, a purpose to all of it.
Okay. Why was New York City so important to be the place for this to take place, and how was that shooting this in New York?
Shooting in New York is awesome and daunting. When Mark wrote the novel, it is very much a love letter to New York. He has said that. And it's impossible not to sort of understand the highs and lows of human experience when you look at New York, because it has all of it. And New York is also timeless. It has its nascent city inside its now sort of more developed city. So it's really a good story to talk about life and also about magic, because the thing about New York is you never quite know what's in the shadows.
And lastly, how do you feel that Peter and Beverly's love has been able to last through all of this time?
You know, this is, I think, the truth of magic, which is love abides. You know, that is the thing that outlasts all of us. If you close your eyes, you still love the people who aren't here as much as you did when they were. That shouldn't be possible, but it is.